We conclude our This Is My Story sermon series with our special guest, Nancy Lafferty, this morning. Many of you know Nancy from her work in our theater community, but here's a little bit more about Nancy's background. She was born in Akron, Ohio, into an artistic and musical family where everyone played at least one instrument. Beginning in elementary school and throughout her high school and college years, Nancy performed regularly as an actress and at the University of Akron, where she majored in speech communication and theater and received a master's degree in communication. During her 45-year career as a college professor and high school theater teacher in 4 different states, she has directed hundreds of shows. She's been involved in community theater in several states, both as an actor and a director. Nancy has also received a master's degree in counseling psychology from Ball State and served as a school counselor for several years in the Indianapolis public school system. Retired now from education, Nancy is now the pastor of Entry Point Church here in Carmel, as well as the chair of the board of the Belfry Theater. Won't you join me in welcoming Nancy Lafferty this morning? Well, good morning again, Nancy. We appreciate you being here with us this morning. I know as a pastor, it is not easy to go away from your own pulpit on a Sunday morning, so we really appreciate your presence here with us today. And over the last few weeks, we've been on a journey where we have heard from congregational and community leaders as they have shared their faith stories with us. And I've also been sharing with the congregation some ideas that I've been having about particular faith stories, how we might title them or rename them. But today, since I have a director, a musical genius in our midst, I thought that I might pitch you a couple of Christian play ideas. Now, you don't have to greenlight them now. You can do it later. But here's the first one I'm thinking about. I was thinking that we do a new rendition of Joseph's story, but not the whole Technicolor Dreamcoat route, but instead, we call this one Dream On, and we set it to the music of Aerosmith. Now, you can hear it. You hear that falsetto, Dream On. Yes, you hear it? No? Okay. You didn't say yes, so I'll try another one. I've also been thinking of Adam and Eve's story. And you know that famous leadership book, Who Moved My Cheese? Well, we would call this one, Who Ate My Apple? Sin, Seduction, and the Fall of Grace. Now, you, again, didn't respond to that one, but you don't have all the details, Nancy. I see it as an opera. Yes, your eyes lit up. That was a yes. So, just so you know, I have these ideas all the time. So, in your work at the Belfry, as you're looking at your seasons, I'm your ideal woman. Just come to me. I'm right here. And while I have those ideas, I don't have any idea what you would name your faith story. What would it be and why?
Well, I wouldn't use those ideas, but maybe I'll come back to those at some point in time.
That's fine.
I would definitely call my mantra and my faith story, we will be kind and we will be helpful. That is something that after decades of teaching, especially high school and middle school children, and sometimes elementary school children, that becomes the driving force of how to get along. It lifts us up out of our selfishness and our desire to be a diva, our desire to make ourselves the center of all the stories. And if you remind people, like I do at the beginning of auditions for a children's play, my name is Nancy Lafferty, I'm your director, I love theater, but we will be kind and we will be helpful as we do this project together. And of course, that works on the stage, that works in theater, it works in our life. Those are the ways that we bring the best out of each other and we can give the best to each other.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get involved in theater in the first place?
Well, I was 5 years old, and apparently our kindergarten teacher was a bit of an artist herself, and so she gathered us together one day and she said, okay, kids, we're going to do a play. And so Nancy, you have a strong voice. You're going to be the mama bird. So I need you to get up on this table and cross your legs and sit up there on your nest. And ooh, I loved that. So I got up on the table and I crossed my legs, and I immediately became very critical of everyone else and judgmental. And I said, you know, I was talking, I was sitting there and I was thinking about my role as the mother bird, but he wasn't speaking loudly enough. And should she really be standing right there? I felt like things were amiss as we were trying to put this play together. I wasn't quite comfortable with the way the director, the teacher was running.
What you're really saying is that you were a director at
Yes,
five.
yes, I was.
Okay.
And I was thinking, I can't work with these people. They don't know how to do this. I was 5. I had not yet learned to be kind or to be helpful at all.
I gotcha.
But yes, we were. It was something that became very apparent to me that it was something I was going to love to do. But more importantly, what was great was the teacher didn't try to take the boldness or my confidence and squash it. She did not diminish me. She didn't tell me to be softer, to be quiet, or to somehow dim my light.
You know, that's a real, I think, value that we've heard across all of our faith stories, how instrumental adults can be in either helping to develop the confidence or set the trajectory of a child's life, or how they can hinder that through their words. And clearly you've been blessed, like some of our other storytellers, with people that really poured into you. But it wasn't just people, it was also programs that shaped you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I was fortunate to grow up in Akron, Ohio, the inner city. I attended Akron Public Schools. Akron is the rubber capital of the world. All we did, we were working class people. It was Firestone, Goodrich, and Goodyear. That's where everybody worked, and schools, and the University of Akron, and that was the city. But somehow that school system had an incredible fondness for the arts, and they infused the arts back in the 50s and 60s, well before anyone else was doing this. Those students that went to the Akron Public School System, we got on buses and we went to Cleveland and we saw theater performances and we saw the Cleveland Orchestra and we went to the opera, we went to the ballet, we saw all of this. And what a difference that made in the trajectory of my life. I am certain I wouldn't have turned out to be such a creative artist if I hadn't had that as an elementary, middle school, and high school student.
Yeah, so you were shaped by this experience that so many people don't get to have.
Oh, exactly,
And
exactly.
I wonder, what did that teach you? What did that open up for you?
Well, the exposure was phenomenal. The exposure to other languages, to scenes and to experiences. I mean, we're sitting there at the opera, and of course, you know, I wasn't the most alert person. We kind of dozed off a little bit, but I woke up just enough to realize that I now understood Italian. Because the man was singing peanut butter jelly. And so I know those words. But it changed me because it exposed me to things that I absolutely didn't know anything about.
I have not seen that opera, but
It's
look
a great one.
forward
It's a lunchtime opera.
Lunchtime opera. Thank you for that. Well, you know, I as I'm listening to you, so often when we think about theater, we place it over here on the spectrum with the secular. And then we think about church, and we place it over here on the spectrum with the sacred. And we never see the two meeting in the middle. And yet, as a pastor and as a director and performer, your life is really a testament to those things coming together. How do you see theater and church meeting in the middle?
Well, I do believe they come together, not only in my life as a human and as a performer and as a theater director, but also, I just want to say this about the spiritual and the secular. I go to one of my favorite quotations by theologian Pierre de Chardin, who said these beautiful words: "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." And so I believe that everything is potentially sacred. Everything is potentially spiritual. We just don't necessarily look for it. And so we have moments in theater that are just like life, that are just like church. For example, one of my favorite stories is after we had finished a performance at Manual High School, all of the parents had come and everyone, it was a success and all the kids felt really good about it. And so everyone's leaving and I'm walking through the auditorium to clean things up. And all of a sudden I noticed one of our students who had just performed was sitting several rows back, and she was looking at the stage that was now empty. And so I called her. I said, Alma, we need to go now. It's time to go home. And she didn't say anything. She just sat smiling at the stage. And so I slid in the seat next to her and I said, "So tell me what's going on." And she looked up and she smiled and she said, "I finally have something." And I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well, my brother can play sports, my sister can dance, my other sister does things, but I finally have something up there." So what she was saying was, I have a role now. I have a place in this world. I can do something. I have something to give. I have something to be. And at that moment, I was realizing the connection really between theater and church. Because in church, I think we also do that. I think we say, I'm home, I'm accepted, I'm found, I'm loved, I'm welcomed. I can be something here. And then ultimately we can say, I can have faith because they accepted me, they loved me, they brought me in. And, that's incredibly powerful. It's also true that we mutually need each other in all things. In the theater, I can't run the lights and the sound and be on stage and be the director and do all the things. We need people to do all of the things. And it is a mutual need. It is a mutual dependence. And isn't that the same that's true in church? You don't play the organ, thank goodness.
How do you know?
Yeah.
I could.
So we need someone else to sing, clearly. And so people need to come and listen, and people need to preach, and all of this and all of those roles are equally valued. All of them are equally important and necessary, and all of those roles need each other. You can't speak without an audience. They can't come and hear anything if you don't speak. And again, I go back to one of my students at Broad Ripple High School who was a 9th grader who had an epiphany one day and looked at me and said, I get it. You're the director and we need you to direct us, but you can't do it without us. You need us to be your actors. And that's the way of the world. We all need each other and we need to find our place where we best fit. And in church, we need to give everyone an opportunity. Just like Brittany was talking about all the ministries. I was thinking, there it is, right there. It's all of the places where we can give and receive.
What you're really describing is this mutuality of community, but also of grace. And yet, the text that you chose this morning is very different from the community that you're describing. In fact, I'm sure everyone here was like, what is she going to talk about? And I wonder why you chose that particular text and how it relates to your own faith story, especially because when we read that text, it no matter how many times I read it, I'm always drawn to the line, she was caught in the act of adultery. And the last time I checked, this is just me, you had to do adultery with somebody else, and she's the only one there. Yes. So I would love to hear how this story connects to your faith story.
Well, the first thing I want to say about grace is that grace is one of those things that, we all want, but we are often reluctant to give.
Okay, you have to say that just one more time for us.
Grace is something we all want, but we are often reluctant to give it to others. And this scripture is a story of grace. It is a story of someone that needs grace. And so there was a time in my life, and before we get into my story, I just want to remind you and everyone else to be kind and to be helpful when I tell this little story. So I was rehearsing a play one time, and it was a sort of a madcap comedy, and there were lots of entrances and exits. I was chasing one of the other actors, and then we would run off the stage, and then we would come back in the next time, and she would be chasing me, and we were just like running around, and finally the last time we got through a doorway and out this doorway, and we came back through, and we got tripped up, and we fell down on a rug that was on the stage, and you might think that's the point that I needed grace, but that wasn't it, because as we fell, of course, we were laughing. And as we were laughing, something else was happening to me, and I peed.
Nancy, they didn't hear you all the way in the back.
Oh, yes, they did.
Say that again.
So I peed my pants. And so while I was doing that, it was not just a little bit, it was a lot. And so it was not something I was going to be able to hide. It was puddling on the rug. And so while they were laughing at me because I had fallen, I knew this other thing I was gonna have to go into WITSEC or move, or I didn't know what I was gonna have to leave and never come back to rehearsal because they would all know, and I just didn't know what to do. So I finally just stood up, and no one else except the other woman that was lying near the puddle knew what was going on. And so I stood up and said, I peed on this rug right here. And so
let me just stop you. This is the only rug we have. So if you could just be mindful as you're laughing, that would be really helpful.
No, it's fine. I went to the restroom.
Okay.
But that was a huge moment. I was the woman paraded in front of the group. At that moment, they could have absolutely ridiculed me. They could have cast me out. They could have shunned me. They could have told stories about me forever, which they do tell that story forever. but they tell it kindly and gently, and they somehow tell that story with grace. But it obviously humanized me. But they gave me grace, and they laughed with me.
And not at you.
And not at me. And they didn't mock me, and they didn't cast me out. So very similarly to the scripture, I received unbelievable grace in that moment.
I just had this revelation that maybe your faith story should be called Puddles of Grace. The Nancy Lafferty story. Just let it sit with you. Just let it sit with you. As you're sharing that, and I'm also reflecting on that scripture, what we see Jesus do there is what you do with your plays or your musicals. Jesus redirects it. Jesus changes the script.
Yes.
Right? They come and they think they've got the villain. And then all of a sudden, Jesus changes the roles and asks powerful questions that changes the scene, that changes the outcome, that offers grace, not only to that woman, but even to those people that were there to punish her. They receive grace in a really powerful way as well. So I don't know about you, but I will never read that scripture in quite the same way without the visual that you have provided for us today. So God bless you in your ministry. But I also just want to share with our congregation that as we're continuing this series, This Is My Story ends, but the story that we're writing with you and with Noblesville First and the Belfry is just beginning. Yes. Can you tell everyone about the partnership we've been working on over the last few months?
Well, what began, I know, in your heart as a desire to bring these organizations together continued with a very important conversation between you and Carla Crandall as you were flying home from Israel.
That's right.
And I was the recipient then of the rest of this story. And so what we are excited to announce is that the Belfry Theater will not only be performing a few of our shows for the season here at your church, but also we are going to provide some instruction for the children. So kids ages in grades kindergarten through 5th grade will be able to come to a camp, a sort of an arts camp that will happen the second week of fall break. And the Belfry Theater will provide the instruction, allowing these students to attend every single day for 1 week here at the church and receive some instruction on how to do a play and perform a play, and then also some choreography, visual art, and vocal music, as well as writing monologues. And so I am so excited about how this is going to happen because it's going to involve also some of the middle school and high school students that attend Noblesville schools. They will be helping as sort of camp counselors. They will also be doing some of the teaching. Some of the artists here in your church will be leading that part. Diane Reed and Betty Brown and Deborah Smith will be the visual art teachers. We have some high school students who will be teaching voice, and we have professionals from On Point Indiana Ballet Company in Noblesville. We will be providing and teaching the choreography for that. And so it is going to be thrilling. I mean, at the end of the week, the opportunities those students have had will be thorough. They will have auditioned and rehearsed and performed a play and written a monologue and performed it and done an art piece and learned a song and learned a dance. And I mean, that's a fabulous week. I mean, that is amazing.
Yeah. We are so excited about this. And what it really reminds me of as a pastor is I had a thought or an idea or an inkling of what God was calling us to as a congregation. And then that started to be filled in with the wisdom of Dr. Jeff Wright and the wisdom that you provided, the wisdom that some other folks that are coming alongside are providing. And sometimes when we have a vision or a dream about what God is doing, we don't want to share it because we're not sure how it's going to happen. You already attested to the fact that maybe, song and dance is not my thing. That's fine. But that doesn't mean that's not what God is calling us to do together. And so what's exciting to me about this story is that it's a reminder that we don't write any chapter by ourselves. Not only is God with us, but God puts us in relationship with other people to write this story. So we hope that you will be joining with us. You'll find more information over the coming weeks about how you can sign up to volunteer or how your kiddos can be a part of this experience. We also want you to share it with people in our community. It's not every day that a kid comes home and tells mom and dad, I got to rehearse a monologue, be a part of a play, learn choreography, do visual arts. I mean, that's a really full and enriching experience. And we see from the testimony and stories of your own life how that leads perhaps to faith. And so, Nancy, we are so grateful that you have shared your story with us today. I know you're also grateful that most of these kids will be potty trained. But more than that, we're excited about the story that we are going to write together. So won't you join me in thanking Nancy for being our storyteller this morning?
Thank you very much.